Hello, my name is Steve Pat and I'm one of the product specialists here at Pegasus Software. My aim over the next 30 minutes or so is to give you an overview of the Pegasus payroll, to show you how quick and easy it is to run the payroll and produce the pay slips, as well as to show you some of the many other features that are provided as standard within this payroll program. The Pegasus payroll is recognised by HMRC under their PAYE recognition scheme. It's multi-company, provides payment frequencies of weekly, 2-weekly, 4-weekly or monthly, and provides full handling of the tax and the national insurance together with fully automated P32 processing. The payroll also handles statutory maternity pay as well as ordinary and additional statutory paternity pay as well as statutory sick pay. The system handles multiple pension schemes. The contribution can either be by a variable percentage or by a fixed value, and you can decide whether the employee, the employer or both make contributions to those pension schemes. The system also has online filing to allow you to submit in-year returns such as the P45 and the P46, as well as end-of-year returns such as the P14 and the P35s. Okay, let's go and have a look at the software. I'm going into the Payroll and HR option here, and let's have a look at the setup of the system. So I'm going to go into the set options. You'll notice that we have multiple groups. Here, for instance, I've got a monthly and a weekly groups, but it could be that I might set it up by department. So I might have a group which is the sales group, the shop floor, the admin, the customer service, the directors. It allows you to go through and set up to 36 groups within the system itself. Let's log into this monthly group. As we can see here, the system allows me to define important information such as what is the company, what is my PAYE reference, what are the various other details associated with this particular company, and what is the current tax year for this. It allows you to go through and define BACS systems so you can set your system up to link to the particular BACS program that you use. In my case, mine is set up to the HSBC. Notice we also have an option here for P32 consolidation. If you're running multiple companies, but they have the same PAYE reference, maybe one company is for your employees and the second company is for your directors, you can actually consolidate the P32 information together. Let's go and have a look at the P32 processing form. Within the P32 processing form, that consolidation is achieved by running this option here, Consolidate across payrolls. And this will bring in the consolidated P32 information from another company and bind it together with the data that we see here. As you can see on this P32 processing form, it contains all of the payment information regarding your payroll. As we can see here, my current payroll is in month 7, which is from October to November, and I can see that one of the weekly payrolls has been run, but week 28 and week 29 have yet to be run. Notice all the information that's stored here. We've got details such as the income tax, student loans, national insurance, and if we go across the columns, we can see the overall totals together with what's been paid and currently what is outstanding for this particular payroll period. We can go through and we can select the option here to mark payments on the record. So I'm going to go through and mark the payment for this date range. It's showing me the total of the income tax and the total of the national insurance that is due to revenue, giving me the overall totals and suggesting that is the payment amount. Let's put in a BACS reference here. And let's save this away. If we now look at that particular record, we can now see that a payment has been made and therefore the balance outstanding has now been reduced to 0, and it shows the date that that payment was made on. At the bottom of this form, it will give us the overall totals of what's been paid and the overall totals of what currently is outstanding to HMRC. This P32 processing form can be modified. So for instance, if I want to see a concise view of this, then I can reduce down the column widths just to show me the overall totals that are on there. Or I can go through and I can hide the detail. So in this case, it is just showing me the monthly totals without that detail. If I reinstate it, then I can see the individual month details in there. So the P32 processing form becomes very flexible in the way that you can look at this information. Indeed, you can look at previous years as well. If you want to look at the data contained in last year's payroll, then we simply select the previous year and it takes us back to that particular year. Let's hop back into the utilities. And let's look at the options for this monthly payroll. Let's go through and let's have a look at the options contained within page 2 of this. Notice we can set on this flag here to allow the system to transact full SMP processing, so statutory maternity pay. I can also tick this flag here to allow full statutory sick pay processing. These are options which you can turn on or turn off. The control is down to the individual user. It also allows us to go through and identify, are we using advanced pension processing, in which case it will allow us to go through and set up multiple pension schemes. If we go and have a look at the pension setup, if I go into maintenance here, I can look at the individual pension schemes. And here we can see that we've got a list of the pension schemes that are applicable to this particular company. If I choose a particular pension scheme, we can start to see that this is a group pension scheme. The employee payment is 10%, the employee's value is 2%, so we set up as percentages. And we're saying here, are there any minimums to a particular period, or are there any maximums in a particular year? And therefore it would adhere to these rules. I can also identify which pay elements are to be included in this calculation of these percents here. I'm ticking this box that says all of the payment elements are to be taken into account when calculating the pension payments. I can turn that off, in which case, when I select the payment types, the system will allow me to go through and identify any of the payment types that I'm looking for. In which case, it may be that only basic pay and overtime pay are to be used within the calculation for the pensions. I'm going to turn that flag on to do the calculation based upon all payments to the employee. If we hop back into the set options again, and we look at the third options flag, we can start to see here, this is where we determine the payment method. So in this case, I've set mine to be monthly, but it could equally be 2 weekly, 4 weekly, or weekly. And I can define the payment method. So it handles auto pay, backs, check, and cash. And I can also determine the length of time that I want to hold transactions for. In this example here, I'm saying that I want to hold the payslip images for 6 months. It also allows you to go through and identify holiday pay. If this was, for instance, a weekly payroll, I might set it to calculate the average pay over the past 13 weeks and use that as the basis for calculating the holiday pay. If we have a look at the NI tables, here we can see table 1, which is effective from the 6th of the 4th 2011, and it shows me the bandwidths associated with income tax on this, and both the employers and the employees' national insurance bandwidths. If I flip to table 2, we can see that table 2 is effective from the 6th of the 4th 2012. We can therefore see the tax rates applicable to that tax year, together with the employers and the employees' national insurance calculations. It also allows you to go through and set up the SSP, and it also allows you to go through and define all of the other statutory payment rates. Notice that it also handles Scottish tax. The Scottish Parliament has tax raising abilities, in which case, if those differ from the main UK, then this form allows you to set up those Scottish specific tax rates. Also under utilities, it allows me to post the information through to the nominal ledger. So if my system is set to link into the Opera accounting system, then I can update both the nominal ledger and I can update the cash book. I can, however, run the payroll completely standalone without linking into the Opera accounting system. Let's look at the payment profiles. This is where you go through and define the pay elements that build up the pay for the individuals. So here, for instance, you can see that I've got basic pay, overtime, expenses, commission. I've got a whole range of other items that can build up to pay. If we look at a particular item, here we're looking at the basic pay, you can see that I can identify whether the basic pay is taxable, is it NIable, is it pensionable, can attachment orders be linked to this particular pay type. If I go on to the next pay element, this is for overtime. I can also note, do I want to print this value even if there is 0 in there? In which case I might want to encourage employees to take overtime, in which case I might want to print it on their particular pay slips. The reverse side, of course, is it allows us to go through and set up the deduction profiles. So these are the various items that I'm taking off salary for individuals. So for instance, I've got things like pension deductions, I've got things like student loan and what have you. These are all typical sorts of deductions that can be made. In this example here, we're using a pension deduction, and therefore it allows me to identify whether I want to deduct this item before I do the tax calculation. And obviously for pensions, that's exactly what I want to do. If we go and have a look at something like attachment orders, it allows you to go through and define an attachment order, and you can set up all of these different types of attachment orders that are allowed. It also allows us to define employee profiles. This allows us to group a number of employees together, but it also allows us to go through for that group of employees to identify which pay elements and which deduction elements link into that particular group. Here, for instance, you can see I've got the directors group, and I've got the directors as ticked as a director. Do they have company cars? If I go on to the next group, here, for instance, I can see these are management. They're not director status, but they do have company cars. And if I go on to this is staff, and they have neither a company car or director. It allows us to define the payments that we want to allocate to these. So here's a list of all the payments. However, there's only a subset of those are applicable to this staff group. Similarly, it allows you to define the deductions. So here's the whole range of deductions, but for this particular staff group, there are only those 4 deductions that are applicable. Okay, let's go through and let's create a new employee. So I'm going to say this employee belongs to the monthly group, and let's create this new employee. They belong to the monthly group. What's the surname? Let's say it's Jones, and the full name is Sarah. She's a Ms. Which department does Sarah belong to? Well, I'm going to say Sarah belongs to the sales team, and I'm going to use the management profile to bring in the payment and the deduction types for this particular employee. What's the start date? What's her date of birth? I'll mark her as a female. And what's the NI number? Notice it's also calculating the age for this particular employee. If I save this away, if I'm paying her by backs, then I can identify the bank account that I need to pay it into. I can also record her address. And a postcode. And is she subject to a student loan deduction? If so, then I can simply tick that box on. Do I have her P45 information? I'm just going to say that a P46 actually is required. And I'm going to save this away. It's now showing you the build-up to the salary. So in which case I can go through and I can say that Sarah is paid £2,000 a month as a permanent value. I could put in a temporary value. In this case, I'm going to say the temporary value is £50. So in this payroll run, that temporary value could be used. I could also set up units and rates. So if this person was hourly paid, I could put the rate per hour, and I could put the normal units, might be 37.5 hours a week at £10 an hour, in which case I can put these into the units and the rates box. If I look at the deduction side, then I can see the standard sort of deductions that will be taken from this particular employee. I'm going to say OK to that. I now have the employee set up within the system. I can go through and I can attach a picture to the individual employee as well. And there's Sarah's picture attached to this particular record. I can also go through and I can record holidays that Sarah has taken. When Sarah leaves, I can mark her as a leaver, or I can transfer her. Maybe she joined the company on the weekly payroll and I want to transfer her through to the monthly payroll. So it allows us to go through and put this information in. It also allows me to go through and calculate her payslip. If I select this option here, we can start to see that her payment in this period, tax and national insurance is being deducted together with other deductions to give a net pay, in this example, of £1,415. Now, of course, running the payroll calculation individually will be very time consuming. So what we do have here is we have a calculation option that allows this to be done on bulk. So I can choose the particular payroll groups. In my example, I'm going to pay everybody. And the calculation will now run through. And here we can see it's printing out some exceptions. So for instance, Sarah Jones is telling us that that is a start of this particular period. We can also see here that Mrs. Fisher should have a NI code of C because she's over retirement age. So we shouldn't be deducting NI from Mrs. Fisher. Once I've done the calculation, I can go and have a look at some of the reports. So let's go through and let's have a look at what's been calculated this period. So I'm going to take this period summary. And I'll just choose the monthly group. And I'm going to send this through to screen. And here's a list of all the payments that have been made for this particular group. So here we can see Sarah Jones, gross pay is $2,000, tax and national insurance being deducted, along with other deductions showing you the net pay. I can also go through and print out the pay slips. So I'm going to print the pay slips for this monthly group. There are multiple pay slip designs, so you pick and choose the pay slip that best suits your particular organisation. And I'm going to print mine through to screen. This is printing on pre-printed stationery. I can also go through and I can pay these individuals as well. So I can go through and I can produce the backs list. So these are all the individuals that are going to be paid by backs. And I can therefore go through and I can submit the backs file through to the bank. For those people that are paid by cheque, then I can produce the cheque output. Start off with which cheque number. And here are the printed cheques. As part of the payroll as well, I can also go through and produce the P46 information. And here we can see the P46 information for Sarah that we've set up. Do I want to submit this information directly through to HMRC? I'm going to say yes. So this will allow me to use the online filing manager to go through and submit that P46 information through to the revenue. If I select this processing option here, I can send to the government gateway. And in our example here, we want to send this PAYE P46 file to the gateway. Notice we also use the online filing manager for submitting the end of year returns and also the VAT returns. Let's select the P46. I identify where the data file is located. It confirms the company. And it's telling me that Sarah Jones P46 information is ready to send through to HMRC. Give the password to the gateway. Confirm the password. And submit. This will then send this through to the government gateway. Now if we go back into the P32 processing for this period, we can actually see that it's now done the calculations for period 30. And if we go across here, we can see the total payment that is now due to HMRC in this particular payroll run. Once I've finished running the payroll, I can then update the payroll. And this will therefore close the payroll down for this particular period. And now we can see that the payroll is being updated. What it basically does here is it updates the to-date figures, it saves away the payslip images, it updates the history, it then sets the system back to run this process for the next payroll period. If we go into processing, and we look at Sarah's record, we can now drill down into the history for Sarah. And we can see what's been paid to Sarah in this particular period. And we can actually drill down into the payslip should we want to reprint this payslip. Okay, let's go and have a look at how statutory maternity pay works. Let's choose an individual within my payroll. I'm going to choose Wendy Turner. And under Wendy Turner, I'm going to go through and I'm going to enter statutory payments. And I'm going to say that Wendy is now pregnant and is notifying us of that fact. So I'm going into statutory maternity pay details. When is the baby due? Has medical evidence been received? I'm going to say yes to that. And what's the intended leave date? Notice it's given us warning messages here. She hasn't given us 28 days notice that she wants to leave. I'm still going to accept that, however. And if I save this away, then we can start to see that the system is calculating all of the dates associated with statutory maternity pay. Let's go through now and let's say that she actually starts her maternity leave. And I'm going to say that she starts her maternity leave on the 1st of the 11th. And I'm going to save that away. It's given me a warning message to say that she's given me less than 28 days notice, but I'm going to accept that. In which case now it's calculating that there's going to be 6 weeks at that rate, and therefore that's the value for the first 6 weeks. There's going to be 15 weeks at that rate, and that's therefore the total value of that. And there's going to be 18 weeks at that rate, and that's the total value that's due to be paid. The reason it's showing me those two is that it's taking it across the tax year. So in which case, in the 2011 tax year, the statutory maternity pay is £128.73. In the 2012-13, the statutory maternity pay is uplifted to £135.45. The system is automatically calculating that. Now if we run the payroll calculate, it will calculate out the maternity pay for this individual. And therefore we can start to see the total payment for this individual in this particular month. Let's have a look at some of the reporting within the system. We've gone through and we've seen a number of printed reports. Let's go through and let's have a look at the view options. These are particularly powerful ways in which you can review information. Let's go back and set this to a date in the past, and let's refresh this. Can we see on this particular view, it shows me each of the employees in that date range, and for that employee, it shows me what's been paid to them. So I've got company pension scheme, additional voluntary contributions, and if I look at the basic pay, I can see the basic pay for each of those months. And here, over the year, I can see the total pay that has been made to that particular individual. The beauty of these views, however, are that they can be exported. So if we have a view that is showing us a particular set of information and we want to export it, we can copy the data, and in this example I could drop into Microsoft's Excel and I can paste that data in. And here we can see that that information has now been taken out of Opera and has been placed into Excel. We can create these views simply and quickly. Let's just create a view. I'm going to create a new view, and I'm going to call this view Year-Month Analysis. And in this particular view, I'm going to include the calendar year, the calendar month, and I'm just going to include who the employee is. Notice it allows us to go through and define 6 levels of analysis. I'm only using 3 in this example. If I save this away and we go back to the view screen, I'm going to select both payroll groups. Let's change the from date to be 1st of Jan 2009. Let's select our new year-month analysis view, and let's look at this criteria tab. The criteria tab allows us to be selective on the data. So for instance here, do I want payments only, deductions only, or do I want both types? I can also be selective here for the payments types from, payment types to, deductions from, deductions to, employee from, employee to. I can even go down and select which particular tax year I want this information to be filtered on. If I go back to the view and refresh the data, I can therefore see it is now pulling in that data associated with the criteria that I've specified. If I go into 2010, for instance, I can see month by month, I can see the totals that are coming through for those payment types. If I go into 2011, then I can see the months there. I can even drill down into the individual months. So here, for instance, is September, and here's Richard Godson, as well as all the other individuals and their total of the payment. I can drill down into those and I can see the various pay elements that are being built up. I can even drill down further to the payslip image. So here's the image of this particular payslip, and if it needs to be reprinted, I simply select the print icon from here. I can link the information in this form to what's being displayed on the grid here. So for instance, if I link it using this push pin, as I change months, let's go to August, this data is refreshed for August. If I go to 2011, then this data is refreshed to show all of the information, all of the payment types for 2011. Equally, I can go back to 2010, and that will show me the totals for 2010. These are active grids, and what that basically means is if I right click, then I can sort the data ascending or descending. I can go through and I can add or hide columns from this, and of course I can copy the data and take that across through to Microsoft Excel, as we saw earlier. We can also use reporting as well to send reports out to Excel, but what we're doing there is we're basically pushing information into Excel. We do have another product called Pegasus XRL, and that allows you to use Excel to pull information out of Opera 3. The advantage of that is that you can therefore be selective. Which data do you want to pull into the spreadsheet? Do you want to apply selection criteria, such as I want it from this month to that month, and do you want it in predefined formats? In other words, these could be management reports that are reported on each month, and you have a predefined format. XRL allows you to extract all of that information from Opera 3 across through into the Excel spreadsheet. Okay, let's close this down. Okay, included as part of the payroll program is HR. Within this system, it allows us to go through and enter personnel information. So if we look in the processing and we call up our individual Wendy Turner, for instance, the sorts of information we can store here are along the lines of the diary. And here we can look at the diary information. So we can see, for instance, that Wendy has taken those days off on holiday. These ones marked in orange are bank holidays, and those marked in white are the weekend non-working dates. So it allows us to go through and have a look at the holiday for this particular individual. It also allows us to go through and enter absence records. So if, for instance, an individual is off on holiday, I can record that, but it might be that we're giving them a compassionate leave, or it might be that she's on maternity, in which case I can record that sort of information here. It also allows me to go through and record information associated with education, contact information such as next of kin, as well as going through and putting in training records, disciplinary records, and it also allows me to store salary information as well. So here we can see, for instance, that this individual joined us on that date at that salary, and then on that date the individual was given a pay rise that took her to that salary. So salary increases can be recorded within the system itself. Okay, let's activate a new application called Document Manager, and let's see what impact this has on personnel. Okay, now we can see there's a new option up here called Document Manager. Let's go back into Personnel for the monthly group, and let's call up Wendy Turner's record. What we can now see is there's a new option on here called Documents. This means that we've got documents stored against Wendy Turner's record. Let's launch the Document Manager by double-clicking this icon. And we can now see a list of documents that have been attached to Wendy Turner's record. If we look at some of these documents, for instance, we can see we've got Wendy's driving licence. If we launch this document, we can see that we've got the scanned image of Wendy's driving licence. Down the right hand side, we have a whole range of options that are available to us. So for instance, we could go through and we could print this document, we could email this document, or under the Actions button, we could go through and we could delete this document, or we could protect it by providing a password for access through to this specific document. These options down the right hand side form part of your security profile, so you determine which users have which functions. You might, for instance, have a user that has access to all of these options. You might have another user of the system that can only go through and view these particular documents. Let's have a look at this birth certificate for Wendy. Here's the birth certificate, and we can zoom in. And we can look at the rest of the documents for Wendy. This is a much safer way of storing information as opposed to the old method of simply photocopying this information, putting it into a filing cabinet and locking that filing cabinet. These documents are stored electronically. They are encrypted, so the only people that can view these documents are the ones that have access to the document management system and that they have relevant security rights that allow them to get in to view those particular documents. Notice as well you can restrict which areas of the system particular users can go into. So storing documents forms an integral part of the payroll and the personnel solutions. Okay, let's close this down. In conclusion, we can see that this payroll allows us to set up multiple companies, allows us to handle multiple payment frequencies of weekly, 2 weekly, 4 weekly, monthly, handles full statutory maternity pay, statutory paternity pay, statutory sick pay, allows you to define multiple pension schemes and assign them through to your individuals, allows you to run online processing of the P45s and the P46s, as well as the end of year returns for the P14s and P35s. It's used by tens of thousands of companies within the UK, from those that have less than 5 employees to companies that have greater than 50,000 employees. And most importantly, it's very easy to use. Thank you for watching this presentation. For further information, please go to pegasus.co.uk and select Find a Partner.